Usain Bolt is one of the fastest sprinters of all time. He ran 9.58 in the 100 meter, and although I've only trained athletes to run 10.2 and 10.3 in the 100 meter, I think I can break down some of his workouts so you can understand how to sprint faster from his type of training. The first thing is going to be A switches above a wicket. So what's good about doing A switches is that you're actually developing something called thigh angular velocity. This is how fast you can drive down your thigh or your leg at peak hip height. So if you drive your knee up at 90 degrees, for example, and you want to drive it down fast to improve stride frequency, this is going to help you do that at a better rate. It's going to improve stride frequency and force production to the ground, which projects your body forward, which is what sprinting is all about. So he's doing A switches above a wicket to have some accountability in terms of positioning, and then he's just finding some rhythm, developing some coordination, which is all key at the top level of improving sprint speed. Like I said, always notice that he's always going to land under his center of mass. This is a fundamental that every top sprinter is going to have. There is no ifs, ands, or buts. Landing under center of mass so you can project your body forward. Next one's going to be hurdle mobility. It's not my favorite variation, but this is always going to end up working for most athletes. What you're doing is getting some external rotation of the hip and internal rotation. This is the internal rotation part where you're driving this hip in, and then this is external rotation where you're driving that hip out and you go both directions. You need internal and external hip rotation. For external hip rotation is for force absorption, internal hip rotation is for force production. So it's a good way to improve that mobility aspect and also get the hip flexors burning, which can help with top end sprint speed, of course, as we all know. And the higher you can get your hip, the more you can drive it down. And the more you can drive it down, the more force you're producing into the ground. So yes, there is some merit to improving hip flexor strength at fast velocities. So this is a regular box jump. We all know that force production in a vertical plane is really important. So we're trying to jump as high as possible by landing in a quarter squat position. We never want to land in a deep squat position. That's what a lot of people do. They'll find a box to try to find as high as possible. One is just an injury risk, and two is just not the most effective way to improve your vertical force. So you try to jump as high as possible, land either straight leg, quarter squat, or even half squat. You even see Johan Blake, I believe, in the background landing on one leg to get a little bit eccentric dynamic control when you land right there. Not a bad thing at all, landing in a quarter squat, so he's obviously producing a lot of force. I wonder if he's jumping off one leg. Let me scroll back real quick. That's one of my favorite variations, of course. Yeah, he's actually jumping off one leg, which is way more transferable to sprint speed. So if I were you, I would do single leg box jumps off one leg. I might even put reps and sets above here for every exercise so it can help you out even more. And also, too, if you're trying to improve force production, but you don't want to get shin splints, box jumps are probably one of the best ways to improve it, especially as a beginner, because you're not getting that eccentric loading from landing. That's what jumper's knee is, or shin splints come from, is from the landing portion of a plyometric exercise, a sprint, or a jump. So when you're doing box jumps from a high height, you're not getting that landing portion. You're just getting pure concentric power and a little bit of landing, but it's nowhere enough to get you jumper's knee. So you can actually improve force reduction and do a lot of jumping without hurting yourself. So not a bad idea. This is a little bit of a core exercise, and you're also getting some extensive loading to the Achilles tendon, right? So I know he had some scoliosis, so doing core work is obviously going to help with the back pain or the back issues he had because he's a taller person. And then you see that he's landing in that sprinter stance position, which is loading the Achilles tendon at a low intensity. So you're doing this for 30 seconds to even a minute and 30 seconds, 2 to 3 sets, and you're improving the Achilles tendon spring load, which allows it to handle more forces. And when you can store more elastic energy, you can produce more elastic energy, which is what sprinting is storage and release of elastic energy, because elastic power is one of the best ways to improve your sprint speed. So he's improving the stretch shortening cycle and getting some core strength in here to help with his back pain. And yeah, there's nothing wrong with this, right? It's a good exercise to get that loading on that Achilles tendon. This right here is the explosive box step up, where you're trying to drive up as fast as possible from usually like that half squattish position. So you see thighs are a little parallel. This is a little bit high. I would never go above thighs parallel, but this is still good. You're producing force as fast as possible from a sprinter stance position, which is going to transfer well to sprinting, especially vertical force. So I'm not going to be the one to complain on specifics when obviously this worked. And I think he also has weight, some weight ankles. So he's actually improving hip flexor strength because you have to drive your leg up with more weight. So that's, vertical force. And then driving the knee up is going to be a little bit of that hip flexor strength. So overall, this is not a bad idea for improving force production in a max velocity plane. So yeah, and top end speed is actually really good for speed endurance. The last 50 yards of sprinting is actually your ability to decelerate less than the next person, or for Usain Bolt, it's like the last 20 yards. How much can you decelerate less? And improving hip flexor strength can help with that. So not bad. Once again, more core stuff, crunches, sit-ups, stuff like that. I used to be kind of a hater, especially 2 years ago when I made this video on core stuff, but This isn't bad, especially with the back pain he's had. It's just a transmitter of force. So when you improve core strength, I wouldn't say the most important thing because sprinting improves core strength, but you are transmitting force better with a tighter and more rigid core and a flexible and dynamic core as well. So this is exactly what I was about to say. You need to be able to do core stuff in a rotational plane. So doing stuff like twists and doing full range of motion type of rows and presses are really good for improving that core strength and transmitting force from the ankle all the way through the upper body and propelling your body. So Russian twist, crunches, sprinter stance stuff, all this stuff is going to transfer pretty well for sprinting. I wouldn't do it every single day, but 2-3 days a week is not bad if you're trying to build some strength. This stuff is really good, just dynamic ways to load up the core. Like we said, we know he has back pain, so these are just exercises. I'll probably put some reps and sets for all these just so you kind of get an idea how to do it, but or how to program it. This isn't bad at all. This is another variation, doing some push-ups, getting some tricep work in, getting some core work in. A plank variation is really good. Like we said, he has some back issues I've heard, or scoliosis. If I'm incorrect, please correct me in the comments. I don't really need to know all the specifics, but I know he had some back issues. So spamming core as much as possible is not going to be a bad idea. In the Speed Academy for our sprint membership that we have over 200 athletes on to improve their sprint speed, we do core exercises about 2 days a week on our off days. So we have lower body days 3 days a week, but then we have 2 upper body days, and we'll add in 3 to 4 core exercises to improve, dynamic control and improve strength in the core. Right here is some low intensity cardio. There's different zones of cardio. There's zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, zone 4, zone 5. I can't really tell what he's doing because I'm just not right next to him. I don't know the intensity he's trying to go at, but it looks like zone 1 or zone 2 cardio, which can help with a base of aerobic endurance, which can transfer over to speed endurance. The way we train speed endurance in the Speed Academy is we'll do max effort 150s or max effort 20-second drills, where we sprint as fast as possible for 20 seconds, rest for 8 to 9 minutes to improve anaerobic endurance, or what some track coaches, like Noah Lyle's track coach, calls it speed endurance. But this is a good way to build the base, especially in the off season, or just to burn some extra calories so you don't put on weight. Sprinting is about being low body fat percentage. For every athlete, in the research, it shows that for every 1 to 2% of body fat, you should put on about 0.1 to 0.2 seconds in your time. If you run 4.8 seconds and you gain 1 to 2% of body fat, you actually might end up running 5.0 seconds, which is a huge difference, especially at the top level. You need to be as low as body fat percentage as humanly healthy. I wouldn't say anything under 8%. I'll go 8 to 12% for most athletes is going to be healthy for max performance. Now, if you're off season, you can go up to 15% probably, but don't be surprised if your times get slower. But you have to remember, you're trying to train athletic qualities without hurting yourself. So you don't want to be as low as possible all the time, but relative strength and body fat percentage, not pure weight, is good. So doing some type of cardio that's low impact, but you're just burning some calories, is never going to hurt anybody because you need to be low body fat percentage. The strength room is meant for 2 main resources. You're either going to try to reduce injury or improve force potential, right? Or maybe some other athletic qualities like mobility. But when we're talking about pure sprint performance, let's look at it from 2 lenses: injury prevention or force potential. When we're trying to improve force potential, we need to be producing force at fast speeds in short ranges of motions that are specific to sprinting and in ways that is not going to hurt us. So doing a quarter squat leg press is a great way to improve force production. Now, if we wanted to reduce injury, all we have to do is slow the velocity of the lifting. So we make the eccentric, which is right here, lowering portion slower, and make the concentric at a moderate pace. But we're trying to improve force production. We're gonna load up 10 to 20% above our 1 rep max of a deep squat or whatever it is, and try to move the weight as fast as possible through a quarter squat position to improve force production for max velocity sprinting. So obviously right here, he has 6 to 8 plates. I'm not gonna count it on both sides. So this is way above his deep squat 1 rep max, and you are not only going to see these loads when you're sprinting or depth jumping, because when you're sprinting, you're taking on ground reaction forces 2 to 3 times your body weight because of momentum. And the same thing with the depth jump. You might even take all the way up to 6 times your body weight. So you're not going to get that anywhere unless you load up quarter squat positions, because you can't load 800 pounds to a full range of motion. So this is probably one of the best ways to improve force reduction and overload the specific angles he's going to sprint from that you're only going to see if you do a high volume of sprinting, which at a top level, you're not going to be able to do. This is a core exercise that is just good for developing core, and some shoulder stuff, perfectly fine. A little bit of a kind of an incline / quarter, overhead press. When I do this, I don't really know. I feel like it put a lot of stress on the spine. It depends on who you are, but it's up to you. This is a great sport-specific glute kickback, right? Once again, what are the rules for improving force production? Fast velocities, right? and ranges of motion that we are going to be lifting from, right? If we're trying to improve injury prevention, right, we're trying to reduce knee pain or improve our durability, then we're gonna go through full ranges of motion. We're gonna do heel elevated deep squats. We're gonna do RDLs. We're gonna do even some power cleans to reduce injury if you do it with the right technique. But when we're trying to improve force production, it's quarter squat positions, smaller ranges of motion, and fast velocities. He's probably have a lot of load right here. He's trying to push and extend through the glute as fast as possible to improve acceleration and max velocity. For hang cleans, his form isn't the greatest, but it's okay. He's the fastest man of all time. And he's just doing some speed hang clings, trying to move it as fast as possible to improve some power through triple extension, which can help. I would preferably do loaded jumps, but if you're trying to do less load on the knees, then hang clings aren't bad. Right here is quad extensions. The good way to develop that muscle around the quad, which can help with reducing pain, but he's doing it for velocity once again with high loads. So it can help with quad extensor muscles in terms of max velocity sprinting and even acceleration. This can improve force production. Might not be the best way, but it is a way that's not bad. Here's a basic calf raise variation. For standards, I would want my athletes to get 1.5 to 1.75 times their body weight in a calf raise. Some athletes can get away with honestly just their body weight as long as they control the eccentric well. And this could also work for single leg calf raise as well. So trying to move the calf raise to a full range of motion with some heavy weight is always going to help with obviously triple extension and plantar flexion power. A big thing with here is that he's developing the hip flexor through a range of motion. The hip flexor requires the most tension and the most strength at the back portion. So when you're in full triple extension or hip extension, it does not need hip flexion when you're already midway through. So what you need is a way to load it, which is a good way right here with this cable, through when you're at hip extension and drive it all the way through so you're getting the best benefits of your hip flexor raise. And he's doing that right here by doing a gait cycle variation of his hip flexor raise, and I think it's amazing, right? It's probably the number one way to train hip flexors is going through that full range of motion and challenging hip extension, which is right here, and then developing that strength at hip extension through hip flexion. So perfect. Then some ice bath stuff. Some people say it's good, some people say it's bad. That's for you to tell. I don't really care. Maybe go complain about it in the comments and you figure it out for yourself. I've heard both sides. I've seen research for both sides. I don't care. If you like it and you think it's gonna help you recover, go ahead and do it. As long as you like it and you think it works for you, then go crazy. This is a max effort 150 or 200 meter. This is that anaerobic endurance I was talking about earlier. We're trying to sprint as fast as possible, rest for a long period of time. It might develop some lactic acid, but the main goal is to develop the anaerobic endurance. That way you can sprint at fast speeds at long distances without slowing down as much as you usually do. There's another variation, anything above 6 seconds, which this is a 50-meter sprint. Because he can run 50 meters in less than 6 seconds, not every athlete can do that. He's gonna do that because that's gonna be the strongest stimulus to his sprint speed. And if you can do it under 6 seconds, that's pure sprint training. But if you're doing it above 6 seconds, then that is more anaerobic endurance, and that's not gonna be high transfer to your sprint training. So in the Speed Academy, we only do 20 to 40 yards because most people can't sprint 50 yards under 6 seconds. If you can, then maybe sprint 50 yards, but if you could do 20 to 30 yards and overload your speed training stimulus at 100% with timing, racing, or the type of reps and sets we do in the Speed Academy, then that's gonna be the best way to improve your sprint speed. But for him, he's fast enough to go over to 60 to 50 yards under 6 seconds. So obviously he's gonna do that as the strongest stimulus to improve sprint speed. This is just a technical buildup, probably for his warm-up, and then just a cool down jog for that aerobic endurance and to get the parasympathetic nervous system rolling so he can kickstart his recovery for the next day. Usain Bolt has some of the best exercise selection for his training. It's probably why he's the fastest man of all time. But if you want all this done for you so you can sprint fast like my guys who ran 10.2 and 10.3 in the 100 meter, then you should click the link below to join the Speed Academy so you can sprint faster today.